Welcome back everybody. We are now going to continue our lecture in the non-motorized transport series. We have looked at how to measure bicycle level of service as well as pedestrian level of service. Now we will get into the design aspects of NMT facilities. So, from this lecture onwards we will look at the different design principles and how to design different NMT facilities. In today's lecture we will be taking you through the 10 guiding principles as well as 6 supportive principles for designing non-motorized transport facilities. This entire lecture is taken from the NMT guidance document that was developed by the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, Government of India. So, at the outset we will be looking at the 10 different principles that are listed in this document. So, this is a very well compiled document that takes into consideration the Indian environment, the Indian NMT environment, and develops principles or design principles for different types of NMT infrastructure. Now, they are divided into 10 basic principles or 10 guiding principles, and we will look at them one by one. The first one is interconnected NMT network, next comes complete streets, then bicycle friendliness, walkability, comfort, universal accessibility, safety, security, NMT wayfinding, and finally protection from encroachment. So, when you are designing any NMT facility or any NMT infrastructure, you have to keep in mind these 10 guiding principles. If you keep in mind them, all of these 10, then you are essentially designing a good NMT facility. Now, getting into the first one, which is the interconnected NMT network. If you often ask a pedestrian or a bicyclist why we don't often walk or bicycle, one of the reasons they will tell you know or let you know is that there is interrupted facilities everywhere. There is not a continuous, for example, not a continuous sidewalk available from here to where I am trying to go, or the roads that are connected from my origin to my destination are not suitable for bicycling. So, what they are meaning to say is that if you provide me a continuous interconnected network, then I would be more likely to walk or bicycle or use some other forms of non-motorized transport. So, this is logical, because when we are otherwise traveling using vehicular modes, we always have a continuous good pavement, right? We always have a good pavement, but whenever there are lots of potholes in the pavement, or you have some kind of a kacha road coming in between and the road is not paved, then you feel uncomfortable, right? Even while driving you feel uncomfortable, you feel that, well, I should not take this route again, I should take some other route. So, same is the case for NMT infrastructure as well. So, when you are trying to walk from your home to the nearest bank and you see that there is a footpath near your house, but as soon as you reach closer to the bank, the footpath disappears, right? So, that is discontinuous infrastructure, that is not interconnected network. So, if you have such kind of discontinuous networks, then people will not walk or bicycle or use any other forms of non-motorized transport. So, what is usually what the guidance document tells us that when you are designing for vehicular traffic, that should be more at the periphery of your block, whereas inside the blocks you should have well connected NMT infrastructure, right. So, preference should be given to NMT infrastructure within a block area, whereas in the periphery you can have preference to the vehicular traffic. If you design your streets in this fashion, this will encourage a lot of NMT movements. Okay. Especially we should avoid detours for NMT infrastructure, right. Since you have to walk or bicycle, that takes a lot of physical activity or physical energy out of people trying to use them. We should always try to provide them a direct connection rather than a detour, right. If for a vehicle you can easily provide a detour, which only will take will consume a little bit extra fuel. But in case of an NMT infrastructure, if you provide, if the person has to go from point A to point B and you do not provide this infrastructure and rather you provide one that takes a detour like this, he or she may not end up taking NMT infrastructure or may not take a non-motorized form of transport, and then would rather just take a two-wheeler or a motorized two-wheeler and reach here. So, it is always good to avoid any detours and provide direct connect. Okay. So, that is the first principle, you have to have interconnected NMT network. Next is the principle of complete streets. So, whenever you are designing a street, you have to keep in mind that the street should be designed for all modes of transport, including non-motorized transport. So, even when you are designing a main street, for example, this is an example of a main street, right. This is a cross section of a main street which is has a 36-meter right of way. So, even when you are designing a main street like this, you have to keep in mind that on both ends of this street there should be provision given to bicycles, there should be provision given to footpath, should have some parking, should have green infrastructure. So, all this should be included along with your carriageway on both sides and most probably a rapid transit of some sort in the median of the road, right. So, whenever, even when you are designing the arterial in your urban area, you should keep in mind that you should design it for all modes. That is what is called complete streets, designed and operated to enable safe access of all users. You can no longer provide or develop urban streets, urban arterials or even local streets without keeping in mind the NMT people or the NMT users. You have to keep them in mind. This promotes equitable allocation of right of way, and there is a balance of between the movement of pedestrians, cyclists, transit and motorized vehicles. So, you should provide that balance. If you do not provide the infrastructure, do not provide interconnected infrastructure for NMT, the likelihood of people traveling by NMT modes will reduce, and then again we will have the same issues that we have with vehicular transport of emissions and congestion and so on and so forth. So, remember, the second guiding principle is complete streets. The third one is looking at how streets can be bicycle friendly. Now, it is very important to understand that to promote NMT and different forms of non-motorized transport in your urban area, you have to design the facilities in such a way that they are friendly to those users. If you do not have bicycle tracks on each side of the roads, then you should ensure that the pavement, the carriageway itself is designed in such a manner that it makes the bicycle users feel safe, and if they feel safe, then they would ride it a whole lot. So, provide bike lanes, bike routes and secure bike parking to make bicycle an easy option. The other thing in our urban areas is parking. Parking is a big issue, right. We do not have good parking facilities. Wherever we want to park either our motorized vehicle, two-wheeler or even bicycle, we do not have good parking spaces. So, we have to provide good parking spaces along with bicycle lanes and routes that encourage people to bicycle. You would also see that now, in order to encourage bicycle, there are many corporate offices that provide locker and shower facilities. So, if they have employees that are bicycling to office from a long way away, then they provide them good locker facilities and shower facilities, so that if they sweat along their way, they can come and take a shower in the office and change into proper office clothing. So, that also is bicycle friendliness. So, that encourages people to bicycle to work, right. So, that will encourage active lifestyle, health benefits and a sustainable alternative to motorized transport. Bicycling has several health benefits. As you may imagine, it increases the physical activity, levels of physical activity, and helps in reducing a lot of diseases related, be it cholesterol, high cholesterol or blood pressure or so on and so forth, right. And that lastly, it also provides the vital first mile and last mile connectivity to public transit systems. So, when you are trying to encourage people to use public transit systems, bicycle access to public transport stations is also very important, because now if you have good bicycle parking, say for example at a metro stop, then people will just use their bicycle, come there, park it, and then use the metro. Some of the metro systems around the world also allow certain types of bicycles to be taken along with them on the metro during certain hours of the day. So, that is called multimodal transport. Now, you can allow different modes to coexist with each other, so that now if it is the non-peak hour, the traveler can just take their bicycle onto the metro rail, go to their destination, again take it out and bicycle on it. So, you can have that sort of facility as well, but at least bare minimum have good connectivity from the catchment area of a metro station or a bus station or a BRT station to access the metro rails or BRTS, and then have at least good parking there, so that they can come and avail of the mass rapid transit or the public transportation in your city. So, bicycle friendliness is the third principle that has to be kept in mind when you are designing for NMT infrastructure. The fourth principle is walkability, right. Walkability is defined more by the quality of the place than by any transport related metric. So, although we call pedestrian transport, we although use it as use the phrase pedestrian transport, but when we are talking about people walking or the walkability of a space, we are looking at more than just the transportation aspect. We are looking at the environment that is around the around the pedestrians. A good environment, a good safe environment encourages people to walk, and hence increases the NMT usage of non-motorized usage, right. So, attractive pedestrian environment with high level of priority, safety and amenities. You have to have the environment conducive to pedestrians. You have to have a lot of shade cover, lot of trees. For night, you have to have lot of lighting. The space given for people to walk has to be comfortable, so that they are not rubbing their shoulders against each other. So, that all of these things put together is known as the walking environment. So, you have to make sure that the environment given to the pedestrians is such that it encourages people to walk. So, this is a rendering of a town center in Bhubaneswar. Bhubaneswar is one of the smart cities. Sorry, as Bhubaneswar is one of the smart cities. So, they are planning to have their town center remodeled or redesigned in such a way that it encourages a lot of pedestrian activity. Another aspect of improving walkability is to have compact development patterns with a good mix of land uses and active frontage. So, what we mean by active frontage is that if you make the buildings the front entrance of the building adjacent to the pedestrians, then they are encouraged, that the safety levels also goes up. Instead of that, if you have, for example, vehicular parking in front of a building, and then you have vehicular parking here and then you have pedestrians. So, then people are unable to see when they are walking, they are unable to see what is in the building there. So, what people like, especially in commercial areas, is to kind of feel that there is somebody right next to them while you are walking. So, if these buildings, the frontage of the buildings are in such a manner that they make the pedestrians walking alongside them feel safe, then that is something that encourages more pedestrian activity. So, you always try to avoid parking in front of the building. So, you can have parking behind the building. We are not discouraging parking altogether, but have parking behind the building and have your pedestrian footpath or your pedestrian sidewalk right up to the frontage of the building. Compact development allows different types of land uses to be close to each other. If the distances are close to each other, then people are more and more encouraged to walk. Similarly, if there are good mixes of land uses, people can go from one place to the other in short walking distances. So, in order to encourage walkability, you have to have the environment which is conducive to walking. So, you have to provide the environment, and we have looked at what are all the elements involved in providing the environment. The next thing is, or the next designing principle is comfort. Whenever it comes to NMT facilities or design of NMT facilities, comfort is one of the most important things that users always want, right. So, whenever you ask somebody why aren't you walking to your bank which is only 200 meters away, they would say it is too hot to walk, or it is raining so we cannot walk, or the footpath is broken so we cannot walk. So, it is always the level of comfort. All these are pointing towards the level of comfort of the users. So, if we want to encourage more pedestrian activity or more NMT activity, you have to somehow quantify this level of comfort, right. Comfort is a feeling, it is very qualitative. You cannot my comfort level may be different from your comfort level. So, but there has to be, if you try to quantify it in a certain manner, you can do so, and then set a threshold for that measure of comfort, and make sure that you provide that. So, it provides shade, weather protection, pedestrian amenities, visual interest. All of this improves the desirability of walking and also pedestrian and also cycling activity, bicycling activity, right. So, if you are providing some benches alongside say a commercial area where people can just walk alongside, window shop or do whatever they want to do, or maybe there is a cafeteria where they want to sit and have a cup of coffee. So, all of this encourages or provides comfort to the pedestrian, and then he or she would like to walk or use bicycle. It shortens the perception of distance. So, if you make something very comfortable, people will not think that it is too arduous to walk or it is too far away. Suddenly, they have too many things to do along the way, too many things to see along the way, and the perception of distance then shortens, right. Then it feels like, oh, it is just a small distance away, or it is just a 5-minute walk away. So, providing them comfort always is shortening their perception of distance. Thirdly, it creates a high quality public realm with essential amenities such as toilets, dustbins and street benches. All of this put together not only provides the environment for walking and bicycling, but it also enhances comfort levels. So, just as we have to ensure the comfort level of a motorist while he or she is driving his personal vehicle or a two-wheeler, in the same manner we have to cater to the comfort levels of the pedestrians or the bicyclists when he or she is using their bicycle or walking along the along a sidewalk or a footpath. It is no point asking everybody to walk and encouraging everybody to walk, but not providing them with comfortable infrastructure or comfortable facilities. You have to take that into account, right. For example, when you are driving your two-wheeler, nobody likes too many potholes, right. It is very uncomfortable, or nobody likes too many speed humps. That is also very uncomfortable, right. But so similarly, when you are taking care of the comfort of the people riding your vehicles, you also have to take into account the comfort levels of the NMT users. Moving ahead, the sixth principle, which is a very essential principle, is universal accessibility. When we are designing for NMT infrastructure, we have to keep in mind that we are trying to design for all types of users who come under the ambit of non-motorized transport users, right. That include people with disabilities, specially abled people, small children, elderly people. So, all of them combined are categorized as non-motorized transport users. So, here is an example of a wheelchair accessible road crossing in Singapore, right. So, if somebody is trying to cross from here to here, so there are ramps made in such a manner that he or she may be able to use the wheelchair to cross. Even this sort of tactile flooring ensures that for example, a blind person understands where he or she is walking. So, universal accessibility simplifies navigation and reduces physical effort. When we are talking about NMT users, we have to always realize that there is a level of effort that goes into walking or bicycling, physical effort. So, we have to always try to minimize that physical effort. Physically handicapped person should be able to navigate without navigate the pedestrian facilities without external assistance. So, that should be our goal. Our goal should not be that a specially abled person will always have somebody helping him or her. He or she should be able to navigate through these facilities by themselves. So, that should be our aim while you are designing these NMT facilities. That is why you would see a lot of design currently are barrier free designs, right. These are barrier free, meaning that it has no barriers to it provides no barriers to any type of NMT users. Any user can use this. So, you would see even when you are coming across the entrance of a building, in the past you used to have maybe only steps to the entrance, but now also you have to have a ramp access to the building. So, that is an example of a barrier free building. So, similarly, when you are on a sidewalk, you have to have ramps at the intersections, so that people can easily go up and down the sidewalk at the intersections and not have to jump on top of it or off of it, right. Usually people can easily go down the ramps or slopes. So, universal accessibility is something that is very, very essential in case of non-motorized transport infrastructure design. The next one and crucial one is safety. You have to have your facilities designed in such a way that the users feel safe while using such a facility. So, say for example, you have such a large intersection, right. So, this is an example of again a conceptual view of the Bhubaneswar master plan. So, if you have a very large intersection where you expect people to cross from here to there and from there to there and from there to there. So, you have to have proper safe infrastructure that would allow them to do so, right. You have to have a median refuge island, because there are I think 2 lanes here and another 2 lanes here. So, you cannot expect a person a bicyclist or a pedestrian to cross at one go. So, you have to have a refuge island. You have to provide curb extensions, so that this distance that they are crossing reduces, right. You have to extend your curb, so that the right of way carriageway reduces at the intersection, and this distance is shorter for the pedestrian or the bicyclist to cross. So, all of this includes includes the aspects of safety. When you are providing for signals at the intersection, you have to make sure that there is a NMT phase, right. In many such large intersections, you would see in some of the modern intersections, you would see that there is a all red phase. The all red phase allows people to crisscross and cross in any direction that they want to cross in. So, if somebody is crossing from 1 and wants to go to 4, he or she need not take this route. He or she can now take the direct route here. So, what the signals are designed in such a way that it provides an all red phase. So, it is red for this approach, this approach, this approach, this approach and this approach, so that the pedestrians can cross in a crisscross manner as well, and all the vehicles at all the legs of the intersection are seeing red and are stopped. So, you will see such kind of pedestrian signalization also, especially in case of large intersections where there is a lot of pedestrian movement happening. So, all of this comes under the realm of safety. So, all these aspects should be taken into account when you are trying to design for any kind of NMT infrastructure. Physical or visible buffer between motorized and non-motorized vehicles, right? Any kind of buffer, it may be a tree buffer, or it may be on-street parking that provides a buffer. Such buffers also help the movement of non-motorized users. Okay. Moving ahead closely with safety, the other aspect is security. Security of vulnerable groups such as women and children in the public realm should be ensured. Nowadays, you would see that there is a large presence of public CCTV cameras along streets. Also, the provision of proper lighting during evenings and nights is very essential in order to help people feel secure while they are walking, especially women and elderly people and children. So, security has to be paramount while you are designing for them. There is also crime prevention through environmental design, which discourages criminal behavior through urban design principles. So, you can do so by having small lights alongside the walls as well, alongside your facade of your building as well. So, there are design principles, urban design principles that integrates security into them, and natural surveillance obviously that we talked about. So, all of these principles ensure that people feel secure while they are using non-motorized transport as well, right. Large windows at upper levels promote casual supervision of the street. Anybody sitting on the second floor can just have a look on the street. That gives a sense of security, right. Clearly defined public and private space, clear building signage. So, all of this gives them a sense of security. So, while you are designing, again safety is one thing, security is another thing. Both of them have to be taken into consideration while developing NMT infrastructure. The ninth one is wayfinding. So, often we have street signs which again are geared towards motorized users, right. For a non-motorized pedestrian, it is no use for him or her to see a sign that says the destination is 10 kilometers away, because that does not make him or her is not useful for him or her, because they are not going to walk for 10 kilometers. So, when people are walking for shorter distances, you have to have maybe wayfinding at a very local level, right. Maybe at the street level, for example, you have to have such boards at the street level telling them, if you go this side, the post office will be this side. For example, if you go this side, the school will be on this side, which is a 5-minute walk away. So, in terms of time, if you give wayfinding in terms of time, that helps a pedestrian or a bicyclist rather than giving it in the form of a distance, right. Time always, the perception of distance reduces if you give it a time metric. So, wayfinding has to be easy and legible, right. There should be in multiple languages, maybe people and wayfinding should be in the form that people who are walking both are local as well as are maybe from out of that region. For both of them, it should be easy to understand, right. I may know where the local temple is because I stay there, but somebody who is coming from out of town or from another neighborhood may not know where the local temple is. So, just to say that the temple is that way may not help him or her. So, you have to give them a better navigation so that they can walk. This definitely promotes tourism. So, whenever you go to a tourist spot, you may have a many of them have a walking tour, right. So, you should keep an eye and see how during the walking tour there are good legible NMT wayfinding or walking wayfinding. They tell you exactly how to go get from point A to point B, which encourages people to walk. So, that is very essential as well. Lastly, protection from encroachment, right. This is one of the biggest things that we as Indians face alongside our footpaths, especially in the busy commercial areas as well as sometimes in our residential areas. People either park their four-wheelers or two-wheelers on the footpath, or there are vendors who are encroaching upon the footpath. So, you hardly have any space to walk on that footpath. So, rather than fighting with the vendors, for example, to move away from there, if we provide them a proper space for vending and incorporate that into your design, that will help you, that will help in the walkability, or that will help in the help promote NMT usage. Also parking, if you just have proper parking areas for vehicles to park, they would not, I am sure, would not park along on the footpath and encroach upon the footpath. So, all of these have to be taken into account. Of course, there has to be effective enforcement. So, all of these regulations and rules should be known to everybody, where the parking spots are, where the vendor areas are, so that they are only utilizing such spaces. So, those were all the 10 guiding principles that should be used while you are designing a NMT facility. Now, supportive of those guiding principles, there are 6 things that one has to keep in mind. These are supportive principles, right. The first thing, you have to keep in mind the informal sector. You have to make sure that you have mixed usage, mixed land use alongside to promote NMT infrastructure. Make sure transit is given priority in those areas where you are providing NMT infrastructure. Effective parking management has to be there. This will ensure that there is support to the bicycle industry, and also will give rise to the culture of bicycling, right. These are supportive principles in addition to the 10 guiding principles that you should keep in mind while you are developing NMT infrastructure. If we quickly look at them, informal sector, right. Informal sector will always be present alongside the footpaths, but if you ensure that they be present within a certain distance and still leaving a clear path for the pedestrians to walk, that will incorporate both the vendors as well as the pedestrians. Rather than making them encroach upon the entire footpath, you should give them a designated space. Mixed use, a diverse mix and complementary land uses in compact pattern allows residents and workers to walk to work or shop rather than driving for all of their needs, right. If you have a park, if you have a park here, you have your residences here, you have your offices here, you have an open plaza with lots of restaurants here, you have a sporting tennis court here. So, all of this is a complete mixed use area. So, if you have such areas, people will obviously whoever lives here will just walk to the restaurant here, or walk to the tennis court here, or just walk to work from home. So, all of this will be within the walking distance, as this encourages NMT usage. Transit priority, we have already looked at it. NMT provides the very crucial first mile and last mile connectivity. So, whenever you are prioritizing transit, you have to make sure that you provide for NMT infrastructure, or vice versa. When you provide, when you see that there is a lot of NMT usage around in a certain area, you might as well give priority to transit usage, because these people who are using NMT, they would end up using public transport for the longer haul, right. Parking management, we have also briefly looked at that. If you provide on street parking, that provides natural buffer to the pedestrians from the traffic. So, that is always encouraged, but the main point is you have to have proper designated spots for parking, and there has to be enforcement when people are not parking at the right spots. So, you have to take that into consideration as well. It has been noticed that bicycle industry gets benefited a whole lot when you design for good bicycle facilities, good NMT facilities on the roads. Bicycle industry can be supported just by encouraging and providing these facilities, and finally building a cycling culture. We already have lot of people who use bicycle for their daily needs, but most of them are captive users, right? Most of them are users who cannot afford other means of transportation. So, that should not be the case. They should be choice users, they should be choosing bicycle out of their own will, and that will only happen when you have good NMT infrastructure in place. So, building a bicycle culture will bring about a supportive, will support the bicycle industry, which will then help the NMT users grow in your urban areas. So, that brings us to the end of this lecture. Again, this is the reference that we have used, and it is free for download at this website. What we have informed you today are about the 10 guiding principles in NMT design, and along with the 10 guiding principles, we have also told you about the 6 supporting principles. All the guiding and the supporting principles are listed here. In a nutshell, you have to provide the environment, you have to design the environment in such a manner so that it encourages the NMT users to come out and use the NMT modes rather than using their motorized vehicles for all different types of purposes. Thank you for your attention.